Okay, welcome to our next lesson. Now we are going to focus on the production possibilities frontier, or as we will be calling it, the PPF. So the issue with the PPF, given a fixed amount of inputs, how can you maximize output, or what are the different levels or combinations of output that you could produce? And the PPF shows you the maximum output that you can achieve given some amount of time and fixed resources. So given some amount of land, labor, and capital, that is fixed, what are the different levels of output that you could achieve? The maximum of the various combinations is the frontier. I call this the production possibilities frontier. So the graph of the production possibilities frontier, it's one output on the x-axis and one output on the y-axis. Now you can do this multi-dimensional. You could do this three-dimensional. If you're good at drawing, you could draw a three-dimensional graph just fine. And logically, you could think of the PPF with 20 items, right? You can't graph 20 items, but you could think of it with 20 items, and all of the logic holds just the same. Now, for a principles level class, all we're going to worry about here is the graph with 2 items. But just know, everything we think about extends to a universe that has multiple items, which is good because the real world does have more than just 2 products. So what I'll do is I'm going to take a moment and draw out what a call a generic looking PPF is without focusing on the specific products. So to draw out the PPF, we're going to have a y-axis and an x-axis. And the PPF shows the maximum of 2 different outputs that can be produced. And we're going to label these PPF. And I'm drawing on the little computer bamboo screen, as they call it. So it's a little bit messy. You'll have to forgive me on that. But the PPF often will look something like this. It's often bowed out, in the terms of the cost to make the first units of anything is usually a little bit cheaper. But as you make more and more of it, it becomes more expensive to keep making more units of a particular product. And if you think about studying for or achieving grades in 2 different classes, right? If you want to get a good score and you have 2 exams to study for, you only have so much time to study for them. It's probably easy to go from the minimum score, like the first extra 10 or 20 points to achieve on an exam is probably not too difficult, right? You look at the very main concepts and try to internalize them and understand them for the exam. But as you start to learn those and you realize, well, maybe that will get me to a C. How do I go from a C to a B? It might take a little bit more time because then it might take a little bit more nuanced concepts. And that's, if that's the case, where it will take more hours to get kind of each incremental increase in a grade, you would see your PPF look like what we have here, where we'd say it's bowed out. So this is kind of what we'd call a generic looking PPF. What we want to do now is actually look at a specific example. So suppose we have a person who knows how to produce 2 items, pizza and beer. And our person here could produce any of these following 6 combinations of pizza and beer. Right, no pizzas, 140 beers, 1 pizza and 130 beers, 2 pizzas and 110 beers, 3 pizzas and 80 beers, 4 pizzas and 45 beers, or 5 pizzas and no beer. What I'd like you to do is take a moment and try to plot this into a production possibilities frontier. When you plot these, you can do either axis, right? Pizza could go on the X or the Y. I am going to put pizza on the Y-axis. So when you graph this, if you want your graph to look like what mine will look like in just a moment, I will be putting pizza on the Y-axis. But I'd like you to go ahead and pause the video and take a shot at plotting this before you follow along, and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, we're going to put pizza on the x-axis here with beer on the y-axis. And so we need to, one of the first things we need to do on any graph is kind of label the, make sure we're get the coordinates right. We go from 0 to 5 pizzas. So let's go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The intercept. And remember, beer goes up to 140. So why don't we do increments of 20? 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140. So that's 140. Here's 100. Here's 60, 40, and 20. So we've got the axes labeled. If we go back to our problem, we see the various combinations. And all we do to start is just plot the points, right? 0 pizzas and 140 beers. That's one of the points, one of the combinations. So 0 pizzas and 140 beers. And that's one of the combinations. So I'm making this exaggerated, but that's one of the points. 1 pizza and 130 beers was another point. We go back to the problem. Three pizzas and 80 beers was another of the points. So, I'm sorry, we skipped one here. So going back to the problem, 2 pizzas and 110 beers. So 2 pizzas and, let's see, between 100 and 120, that's our point. 3 pizzas and 80 beers was a point, right about. And then we have 4 pizzas and 45 beers, or 5 pizzas with no beer. So the points we're plotting on here are the various combinations that our individual could produce, right? With some level of labor effort, and so some land, labor, and capital is what we say on these. Our individual could produce any of these various combinations. Once you have all of these plotted, you connect the points together. Your notes should look a little bit neater. It's kind of tough with this computer program to draw it out perfectly neatly. But I think we can kind of get the point on what we're doing here. Once you have this, right, we label this. We label this the PPF. That's our production possibilities frontier. So this is what your graph should look like: pizza, beer, and we've got our PPF.